Dudley South Conservative Association held a celebration dinner at the Copthorne Hotel, Mary Hill. It was hosted by Martin Barrington, chairman of DSCA, along with Fajli Bibi, president of Midlands Conservative Friends NHS. The guest of honour was the Right Honourable Priti Patel, MP, UK Home Secretary. Mike Wood, MP for Dudley South, gave a welcome speech. Home Secretary Priti Patel also marked the special festival of Diwali with Midlands Conservative Friends of NHS. The Home Secretary congratulated the Conservatives on their victory and spoke in detail regarding their responsibilities and positive initiatives, which have been taken during her portfolio period. SM Irfan Tahir, World News Midlands.
And a complete pleasure and honour it is to be here this evening. And as Mike has said, and as Paul in her introduction also said, this is about you, this is a celebration dinner. And it's a dinner that actually falls on a very auspicious Hindu occasion, which is Diwali, which is why we had the wonderful lighting of the lamps that you've all just seen. But actually, there is just so much to talk about. And when I say this dinner is about you, it absolutely is. And I will start by saying that as someone who's been a grassroots activist of our party for around 30 years, I know it's hard to believe, folks, and you're all supposed to agree with that. I know how hard it is to campaign to get rid of socialism. And you have all done that again and again and again. Every general election, in electing Mike, and I have to pay tribute to Mike because some of you may know, Mike has been somewhat long-suffering working with me because he was also my principal parliamentary secretary. So he had to herd MPs into division lobbies for me, explain to them why we were being really tough on law and order, which for conservatism is, it's obvious that we are always tough on law and order. But Mike has been a real tremendous support to me since I became Home Secretary. And actually, we should congratulate Mike because Mike has now moved on to become PPS to Deputy Prime Minister, which is a great chance. But even so, you've heard already, Mike has touched on, Damien, Adam, Rebecca, Sue, winning their seats for the first time, crowbarring the socialists out. And that is what we all stand for, because it's our values and beliefs that have absolutely, as I've seen in this part of the country, it's supposed to, I've been coming up here a long time now campaigning, not just in over 30 years, but actually my time as a Member of Parliament, the last decade, for European elections. I think Brian can testify to that as well. I've done a few fundraisers in the region too, for local elections, for general elections, and that's exactly what we do. We support each other because our values are the values of the hard-working silent majority, the people who go out there to work every single day, who actually are quite conservatives and despise all that stuff that the socialists have done again and again and again, which importantly, relates to that period where they took the voters, the electorate, for granted. And that is something we as Conservatives never ever do. So I really do just want to join in and congratulate everyone in the long-standing work that you've been doing. Success doesn't come overnight, it comes from hard work, working as a team, and I know for a fact you've all been doing that for a considerable period of time, and you are led obviously by a great association, great president, great regional leadership, but also a fantastic Member of Parliament. Now, I did say I have a lot to say this evening. There's a reason for this, because as Home Secretary, you'll all appreciate that I'm not exactly a quiet person or a shrinking violet. There's been a lot that I have had to do, and rightly so, since becoming Home Secretary. And to be fair, even before I became a Member of Parliament, and when I entered Parliament in 2010, I have been unapologetic in being vocal about standing up for the hard-working, law-abiding majority, pressing for tougher sentences. That doesn't actually sit with me, it's the Ministry of Justice area and policy, but ensuring that we go back to being a party of law and order and standing up for what we believe in when it comes to sentencing, backing the police. Let's not forget our opponents want to defund the police. They do very little to support UK policing, which I still find quite astonishing. While at the same time, we're not only backing the police, we're funding the police, we're training the police, we're recruiting 20,000 more police officers, in case you hadn't heard. We have 11,000 more police officers, 11,038 to be precise. And with that, more police officers out there on the streets of England and Wales. And that very much speaks to our commitment about cutting crime, beating crime, we have a beating crime plan, and we're unafraid to set targets as well when it comes to cutting crime. We've set a 20% target because we want to make sure that crime is cut, and we want our streets, we want our communities to be safe. And that is effectively what I will always stand for, and I will continue to pursue that. And across the country we are seeing this, because when you were being very successful on election night, you may have noticed that on that election night, 70% of the police and crime commissioners that were elected that night were Conservative. And they were Conservative for a reason, and it's because we are backing the police. We are the party of law and order, and we're standing up for safer communities. But that is only just one aspect, clearly, of what I do and my portfolio, which is an enormous portfolio. And let's not forget, for those of you that remember that lovely freezing cold general election in 2019, where we were all dreaming of hotter climes and saying never again would we campaign in winter. The reality was, back then, we promised the country that we would get Brexit done. Now, as someone that campaigned for Brexit and was very proud to campaign for Brexit, I've also delivered on ending free movement and introducing, do you remember we made you hold up placards during the election campaign saying that we'd introduce an Australian-style points-based system, well, we now have a British points-based immigration system, where we have the brightest and the best coming to the United Kingdom, and your entry to the UK is determined on the skills and the contribution you can make to our country and to our economy, and not the colour of your passport. That is absolutely right, it really is. And we broke all records on this because our points-based immigration system was up and running less than a year from that general election. It went live a year ago, October last year. So that is up and running. We're making major changes on legal routes, legal migration to the United Kingdom. So we've changed sponsorship routes, visa routes, you name it, all for the betterment of our country, so we know who's coming in. We're also in the position now, through long-term investment and changes around our borders, we will be able to do something that no other government has ever done, actually, in the UK, which is count people in and count people out. We've been very clear that that is effectively what we want to achieve, not just through the points-based system, but by ending those fraudulent entry cards, those ID cards that quite frankly are being made in places like Romania, Hungary, Italy, where people could come into the country claiming that they were legal when in fact they weren't legal. And then the biggest reform, and Mike will be a very strong advocate for this because he's lived through the development of our legislation. Exactly that, and the Bill Committee, which finished today, thank you for all your help, is the Nationality and Borders Bill. I should have just said, we have something in the Lords right now, which is the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Bill. And in fact, it's fair to say, Mike has lobbied me in the past, before this bill came together, on dealing with unauthorised illegal encampments. You all know what I'm referring to there, because I know it's been a big issue here. Well, the legislation in the Lords right now will deal with that in a way in which we have not dealt with previously. But that legislation will also deal with one of my favourite subjects, which is protests. You might have seen, there are certain individuals out there right now that seem to like to glue themselves to motorways, to buildings, to Parliament we saw today. We literally saw people super glue themselves to Parliament. Well, we are now giving the police powers to not only remove them, but effectively find them, and there are proper sanctions and penalties. Because quite frankly, we have the privilege of living in a free, open, democratic society, and with that we have the right to protest, but within the law. Yeah. These people are not protesting within the law at all. And in fact, they are disrupting everybody's daily routines and the chance to get to work, get to school, get to medical appointments. These are the very people that have been blocking ambulances from getting to hospitals and things of that nature. So we are changing our laws that there'll be criminal sanctions levied against them, and I think that's absolutely right and proper that we do that. And by the way, many of them are very middle-class metropolitan people that actually drive to some of their protests too, so I think it's all quite counterproductive. But on migration issues, I've already spoken about legal migration. One of the biggest challenges our country faces, which no government really has been radical enough at addressing and tackling, is illegal migration. And for too long, it's kind of like being a dirty word that politicians don't like to acknowledge or speak about. But the reality is, illegal migration is fueled by an abhorrent trade in people smuggling and criminality, criminal gangs, people being piled into the back of lorries, people suffocating and dying in lorries, and people trying to come to the United Kingdom illegally, entering our territorial waters and our country through small boats. And this is actually not a new phenomenon, it's just manifesting itself in a much more visible way on small boats. So Mike has spoken about the Bill Committee that he has been absolutely wedded to, because this is the most important piece of legislation I think this government, for this Parliament, will be leading on, and it is called the Nationality and Borders Bill. And effectively, we are now going to have a policy where we differentiate between those individuals that come to our country illegally compared to those who are fleeing persecution and oppression and need our help. So we're creating safe and legal routes for genuine asylum seekers, and everyone else that comes to our country illegally, masquerading as asylum seekers or economic migrants, will not have automatic right of entry to our asylum system. Our asylum system is completely broken. And to be fair, my predecessors particularly, and I will pay tribute to her actually, Theresa May, she did try to tackle this issue while she was Home Secretary. But obviously it's a difficult, controversial issue. You've got to remember, back in those days we did not have the types of majorities in Parliament that we have right now, and we are pushing this legislation through Parliament. With that, we're going to stop this endless merry-go-round, this carousel of appeals through the immigration courts and tribunals, where people can go back and claim again and again and again, effectively, to stop their removals, particularly if they have no legal right to be in the United Kingdom. Some of you may have read in newspapers, for example, even with foreign national offenders, people that have come to our country, committed the most appalling crimes, they are frustrating our right to remove them back to their own country by putting in a last-minute claim and a last-minute appeal as they are even boarding the plane. Well, I'm saying no to all of that, and we are taking tougher action. We're going to bring a one-stop shop where they get one chance to appeal, and they cannot go to the courts again and again and again, which they do right now, courtesy of the taxpayer. And we're going to change the rules, change the legislation, change the way in which people, when they even come to the country, are treated, how their claims are processed, right down to how they are accommodated as well. We've got a policy now of the introduction of reception centres. So this is radical reform, and I have always been a conservative radical. We are the party that believes in the battle of ideas, and we are here in government as well to find solutions to some of these endemic structural problems that previous governments have found too difficult to deliver on or even tackle. And that also brings me on to the machinery of the government, where, you know, for too often the computer says no. Well, this cabinet, under our Prime Minister, is saying that is not good enough. We are here to bring about change. These are the types of commitments that we went to the British public with in the general election. We are the people's government, and we are going to deliver on the people's priorities. So I think you've heard enough from me now, actually. I mean, that's just a snapshot in terms of the day-to-day big legislation that I have taking place. We've got legislation on national security. In the last session of Parliament, we had at least 7 pieces of legislation go through. We are the department that are changing our laws, doing radical things, introducing legislation on national security, keeping our public safe as well as our country safe. And that is because we believe in our country and we believe in the British people. My final comment, alongside every other member of the Cabinet, and if they were all to give you a bit of an update on what they were doing, you'd get the right impression that this is a government absolutely reforming, delivering